few minutes for questions or discussion from the room. Who'd like to lead off?
Can I ask one?
Please.
Do you have any information about where the threat meter came from? I mean, was the guy who developed, the outfit that developed it, were they tied into another network of their own, or were they just monitoring what was going on with the game, et cetera, et cetera? It just seems like a key tool for the
Right. So, so that the add-on itself came from this a tradition of practice called what's called theory crafting, players for a long time have been trying to game the system, right, for a long time, and basically trying to figure out what's the best way of doing things to be most efficient in beating a particular game. And so this, started at least as early as Dungeons and Dragons, where people are trying to what's called min-max their characters, like minimize the amount of resources spent on this attribute so that I can maximize the resources spent on this attribute to make them uber. When the game StarCraft came out 10 years ago, StarCraft 2 just came out like last month, this term theory craft is basically from StarCraft, that game. And people were basically running tests over and over and over again to see what was most efficient, the most efficient way of doing things in StarCraft. And then that sort of spread into other games, or that the term spread into basically become what the term everyone uses when you do that type of sort of, it's like running experiments or on this sort of mass level in a sort of a collective fashion. And so when people started playing World of Warcraft, World of Warcraft is made by Blizzard Entertainment. They're the same people who made StarCraft. So I think a lot of the same players who play StarCraft moved onto World of Warcraft. And there was already this tradition of theory crafting, from StarCraft. And so in World of Warcraft, there's actually, in the dissertation as an appendix, I include the original post by Kenko, who basically says, I think we can figure out how threat works, and this is all these sort of tests that I've run and everything, and it's pages long, and it has all the sort of evidence that he's collected about how he thinks threat works, and then that led to the add-on creation. But he was part of this sort of larger group that was doing theory crafting. So
he actually reverse engineered it, basically.
Yeah.
And not with any official kind of support from the...
Right, yeah, he was just a player, right.
So would you call theory crafting the same thing as after-action review that they have in the military, or is this something that's beyond that? It sounds beyond it almost.
I think it's more like iterating an experiment over and over again until you narrow down exactly what the parameters are.
I'm actually trying out new things.
And actually now there's a ton of theory crafting websites out there. The most famous one is called Elitist Jerks, which is run by this guild called Elitist Jerks. And if you hop on their website, they have these spreadsheets, that they've created, Excel spreadsheets that calculate all this stuff for you. You can tweak just this one variable and see how much of an effect it has on your DPS or on on your threat or whatever.
So along these same lines that Steve's asking, so you often hear, I'm thinking of this because it's Warcraft and a military metaphor, but what you often hear is, yes, our army is evolving very rapidly to adapt to this situation, but so is the enemy. And so my question is, does the enemy that I'm going after evolve too, so that I have to constantly change my predictions?
Yeah, actually, if you think about the enemy in this case would be the designed events that Blizzard Entertainment has created in the game that all the players are trying to overcome, right? We're trying to defeat these boss monsters that are basically scripted events that the game creators have sort of set up. And so when Threat Meter first came out, after Threat Meter came out, Blizzard had to sort of rethink how they were designing their the way that fights worked in the game. And so the ones that the fights in Burning Crusade, the first expansion for World of Warcraft, were much more normalized, I guess, for Threat Meter. Like you basically had to have Threat Meter installed in order to be successful in the Burning Crusades fights. And then they then started taking some of the things that are in Threat Meter and actually other add-ons and making them part of the game itself. So they were taking this player-created thing and adopting it into the game proper. And so there's always this, and this is what Constance Steinkuhler calls the mangle of play, as a nod to Pickering's mangle of practice. There's always this sort of push-pull relationship between all these different parties in the play space, and that affects the sort of evolution of play.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Other questions or comments? Thought your hand flew up here. Sorry. Second, yeah.
So there are 4 main races that people can choose among when they start out and they build up their skills for their guy, as it were. Do you see some limitations to there being that sort of platform to begin with?
Traits.
Right, and so they can build up skills but how, and so are there limitations for the game, but there are also maybe some concerns to be brought up in terms of there being 4 races for World of Warcraft. If you're going to participate, you have to buy into that system to begin with. For people when they go into society after playing.
Right. So just a note, there's 4 races per side. There's the Horde and the Alliance. When you create a game, you choose whether you're part of the Horde or you're part of the Alliance. Each of those has actually now 5 races. But the race that you choose, so human, elf, dwarf, whatever, then affects which of the character classes you can choose, so warrior, priest, mage, and so on. The races themselves only affect your starting attributes just a little bit, and they also give you access to a race-specific ability. What's way more limiting or constraining is which character class that you choose to play. Although that said, I mean, there's definitely, if you look at like the demographics of who chooses what races and things like that, women just a little bit more likely to choose like a Tauren, which is like this cow type of cow humanoid, and they're more likely to play druids also, which is sort of, the sort of massively multiplayer online game tradition has sort of been stuck in this 3-part role system for a long time. Companies are always trying to break out of that system. When you start playing one of these games, and actually if you play any game, and actually if you partake in anything in life, you're going to be constrained by certain rules, right? And a game is basically a system of constraints or a system of rules. So yes, you're buying into the paradigm of the game, right? When you choose to play a game. I think that over the years, Blizzard and the game community has made like raiding more of the preferred activity that players do, and has made certain ways of doing fights like the right way, which is kind of unfortunate, but there are a bunch of companies like ArenaNet here in Seattle is making Guild Wars 2 right now. They're trying to break away from that model. I don't know if that answered your question.
Structure.
Quick last comment.
Sorry, I do have a question, yeah. Actually fits with the limitations and transferring out of Warcraft into other aspects of life, and that is education reform. When you talk about, you're having an experience with a group of people that are having regular, successful experiences. And I think that's often missing in education, unfortunately, for students and teachers. Do you see this as a way of articulating it? Things like what you've noticed, that in terms of developing expertise, you have to have access to experts in terms of developing that. Do you see ways of maybe transferring some of this out, aside from the limitations, into like, hey, for school reform, if you're having teachers practice and they don't have access to time, and also maybe the way that limited participation affects, people becoming apprentices and developing expertise that is present maybe in this game.
Well, actually, I mean, a lot of the work in the SCG right now in Life Center is you know, trying to link science education to actual practice that scientists do, right? And I think that axis is really important in order to get acculturated to a particular community, right? In terms of, oh, I had something really good to say. I forgot it though. Oh, about success.
Yeah.
This group actually is failing a whole bunch of times, like a lot, right? Every single night, there's at least once when all of us die and we have to sort of recuperate. And so it's more that it's only, so it's not just that we're being successful a lot, but we're also failing a lot. And our stance on failure is totally different than like failure in school, right? And so we're taking it as a learning moment. We're learning like why do this not work out well? And actually, Sarah writes about this in her dissertation with Lord of the Rings online about sort of the debriefing moment after fights is really, really important in order to improve and iterate. And so it's only failure if you don't learn anything from it, you know.
So with that, we're going to come to a close. John, is that right?
Just productive failure
Yeah.
literature, you know, that's a nice connection.
That's right. So thank you all for coming.